Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to our Wednesday deep dive webinar. My name is Catherine Betts, and I'm a senior consultant at Fourlane, and I'm happy to present this week's topic on sales tax. Today, we're going to review the following topics for sales tax: company preferences, item setup, including sales tax items, sales tax groups, taxable and non-taxable items, customer setup, reports, and paying sales tax. I'm going to begin by going up to edit and then preferences, and we're going to look at the company settings for sales tax. Starting at the top, and particularly important if this is the first time you are turning on sales tax, either in a new file or an existing file, we're going to click yes to make sure that the sales tax feature is turned on. The next thing that's going to happen is we're going to be asked to create our default sales tax item. This is going to be this most common sales tax item here, and it is required to have at least this item set up prior to saving this preference change and enabling sales tax. We'll review a little bit later on today how to set up these sales tax items, but don't worry, you can always come back and change this later. In the next section here, I tend to leave my sales tax codes just as the default here, tax for taxable and non for non. And then in the section below, you're going to be asked to determine if your sales tax reporting is cash or accrual. So this might be different. You might have a different sales tax reporting requirement than you look at for your financial statements or file your taxes. So this is going to ask specifically about the sales tax reports. And then you're going to be asked about the frequency that you pay sales tax. Again, it's very common if you're new to sales tax that sometimes your filing period is a little bit longer. If that gets adjusted and you go up to be a monthly filer, you can always come back and change it. If you are turning on sales tax for the first time, you're also going to get a pop-up message asking if you want to make all customers and items taxable. Be careful about that preference. I have a screenshot of it here. This little pop-up, if you're turning on sales tax, will turn on. If you leave these boxes checked and click OK, you will take all of the existing customers in your file and all of the existing items in your file, and they will be marked taxable. That may or may not be correct for your business. If you uncheck those boxes, then you need to be aware that you will need to go back into those items and customers and update their sales tax status to make sure that it's correct. So just be aware of that little pop-up. I know we get so many in QuickBooks, sometimes they're easy to overlook. Next, let's look at item setup. We're going to return back to QuickBooks. So let's say that you found out you just need to start charging sales tax, or maybe you have a new sales tax jurisdiction and a new location where you've established Nexus. You'll want to make sure that your sales tax items are set up correctly. And there are actually two different options we have for sales tax items and sales tax groups. The first step to this process is to create a sales tax item, and these items live on our regular item list with the rest of our products and services. So we'll create a new item, and I'm going to select sales tax item from my drop down here, and I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to call this Arkansas sales tax. The description will populate. I can update that if I want. I'm going to give a tax rate. This is all kind of fictitious rates for today's demonstration. And then I'm going to choose my tax agency. This is going to be a vendor on my vendor list. Sales tax is organized on our reports by the vendor that's chosen here. So make sure that if you're setting up multiple sales tax items for the same state, that they all have the vendor, that you're consistent with this. So this is our first kind of basic step, is we need to make sure that we set up sales tax items. And I'm going to add that. You can see that here has been added with my other sales tax items in my demo file here. Now, in many places, sales tax is not just a single item. It might be a composite rate that's comprised of a state tax, but also additional taxes for your county, city, or municipality. And these rates can vary from city to city and county to county within the same state. And this is where sales tax group items come in handy. With a group item, I can keep the consistency of my reporting using those items. For example, I might need to calculate my total Texas sales tax, but then I need to set up unique groups by county to capture the specific location taxes. So let's look at two different examples of a group item setup. I'm going to start with some examples in Texas. The first item that I set up, this is a sales tax item, is Texas State. Called this Texas State. The base state that all locations charge is 6.25%. My tax agency is the Texas State Comptroller. In my location in Travis County, we also add a 1% tax, again payable to the Texas State Comptroller for Travis County, as well as the city of Austin, in this example, is going to have a 1% tax. Now, in order to combine all three of those into the tax rate of 8.25%, I need to use a sales tax group. And I've set that up here and called it Travis County, Texas Sales Tax. So this sales tax group is comprised of those three individual items with a group rate of 8.25%. So let's look at a different example using kind of some of those same similar elements. In Kent County, Texas, we're going to have that same Texas state sales tax rate of 6.25%. And in their county, they also have a 1% county tax, but they do not have any additional taxes. Their tax rate is slightly lower. It's 7.25%. So this group item shares the common sales tax item of Texas State, but identifies out that unique county piece and is going to accurately calculate the tax for my sales in this county and Travis County. There's one other piece of the puzzle we need to look at on our item list for sales tax. We need to make sure that we designate on an item-by-item basis if the item is subject to tax or not. So let's look at the item for dog food. For my file, for today's demo file, dog food is not subject to sales tax. So I have selected a tax code here of non. This is not subject to sales tax. That means that even if a customer is taxable, they won't be taxed on this item. If I look at a taxable item, let's say dog collars, this item is subject to tax for my demo file here. I've marked this with the tax code of tax, but again, this would not be subject to tax for a non-taxable customer. We're going to look at some of that logic as we continue this discussion today. Next, let's navigate over to the Customer Center, and we're going to look at the setup of our customers specific when it comes to sales tax. At the customer level, we have our sales tax settings. And here we are asked some really important questions about the setup of our customers. The first question, is this customer subject to tax, yes or no? If yes, we're going to select tax from our drop-down menu. If no, we're going to select non. This is the first level of our decision-making process that we'll use to tell QuickBooks how and when to charge sales tax. Sales tax is determined by the status of the customer and then the item. And again, we'll look at this logic here together in just a moment. Now let's look at another example, my healthy pet shop. I'm going to again click over to the sales tax settings. This customer is set up as non-taxable. Their tax code is non, and they have a resale certificate on file, so I've entered the number here. It may also be a good idea for me to scan that resale certificate and attach it to the customer profile using the document center, so everybody can see that resale certificate if it comes back up. I've made a chart to help us understand the logic of how sales tax moves through QuickBooks at a transaction level. So let's take a look at that together now. The first question that's asked to determine if a transaction is going to be taxable is the first question is the customer taxable? If the answer is yes, the customer is taxable, then we start to look at the item. We say, is the item taxable? If the answer is yes, then we have a taxable sale. If the item is not taxable, in our example with our dog food, then we have a non-taxable sale. If we go back up to the top and we say, is the customer taxable? And their answer is no, then we have a non-taxable sale. So we don't have to worry too much beyond that because it is this top question, is the customer taxable, that determines most of what's going to happen here below. Now that we have seen some of that logic, let's walk through a few examples so we can understand how the sales tax is calculating. First customer we want to look at is my customer here called Fancy Feed and Friends. If we look at their sales tax setup, we can see that they are taxable and their sales tax item is Oklahoma. Because they are subject to tax, they will be charged tax on all taxable items and not charge tax on non-taxable items. So you can see in my system a couple of things here. So dog leash has the tax designation, it's subject to tax. The food and treats are non-taxable, that's determined at the item level. And then my dog bed is subject to tax. Down at the bottom here, I have my 8% Oklahoma tax, which is calculating that out to be $10. And I can see that my taxable customer code here is tax. Okay. Let's look at another example. Let's look at Lone Star Pet Supplies. Lone Star Pet Supplies, perhaps this is a wholesale customer. They have a resale certificate on file, so they are marked as non-taxable. If I go to invoice this customer that is non-taxable, even things that are normally taxable to me, like my toys, are marked as non. And then I don't have any issues with sales tax calculation, even though you can see my Travis County sales tax item down here at the bottom. I have a sales tax calculation here of $0 and a tax code of non. So again, following that logic through, the customer is determining how that sales tax gets calculated, even on similar items. Let's do one final example here. Let's look at Nancy Baker. Nancy Baker uses that blended sales tax group that we set up earlier. Her sales tax rate is 8.25%. She doesn't know that she's being invoiced with that sales tax group. All she knows is that her sales tax is being computed correctly. And when I bring this transaction in, I can see that my 8.25 sales tax is computing here. I have the correct designation of tax and non-tax for this customer. So that's just a good way to illustrate our sales tax setup is working correctly and applying that logic that we've described. So now that we've set up sales tax and we've entered some transactions, let's look at some of the reporting behind the scenes. The most important report that I look at is the sales tax liability report. To do that, I'm going to go to reports and then vendors and payables and then sales tax liability. There's a few things to notice here on this report. Because I pay sales tax to multiple taxing agencies, you can see how they're organized. They're organized by that tax agency vendor we chose when we created that item. Kansas up here, all of my Texas items, and then my Oklahoma item. Because I am using sales tax groups, Texas might look a little confusing, and you'll notice this multiple taxes for Texas State Comptroller with a negative. That's an elimination line. Our total sales for the month of Texas is $4,751. But because of the calculations of the group items and how those are split, we don't want to double count. So the system puts that number in there so our total tax and our taxable sales tie out. And with all reports in QuickBooks as well, I can double click to see the detail behind my taxable and non-taxable sales, and I can drill down in to look at those individual invoices as well. In addition, there's one other report fact that we should look at on this. We have our sales tax payable in this far right-hand column. This number on the same report date and the same report period should tie out to your balance sheet. Oops, last month. So on the same basis, my sales tax liability is on accrual. My sales tax payable, $128.78, should tie to my balance sheet on accrual, $128.78. If my balance sheet and my sales tax do not match in their basis, I just need to switch that on my reports. You're also going to notice on this sales tax liability that we do break down into taxable and non-taxable sales and total sales. All the information that you're going to need to file your sales tax on your state's website. You're also going to notice that these sales tax items are grouped under the vendor name, and it's a really common mistake when I look at my clients' books to see multiple vendors set up that all mean the same thing. Texas Comptroller, State of Texas, Texas Comptroller, Public Accounts, and then this report gets really hard to read when it's disorganized like that. The cause of this is having inconsistent vendors when you're setting up your sales tax items. So it's a good thing to watch out for. The other report that's part of sales tax is our sales tax revenue summary. This report is a shorter version of the sales tax liability report we looked at before, and it does not include any of the calculations for sales tax. It's just the tax revenue. You can drill down into this report like any other report to see those individual transaction lines within here. Paying sales tax is the last item on our agenda for today. When it's time to pay your sales tax, I highly recommend that you use the Manage Sales Tax button from your home page for your one-stop shop for all things sales tax. Right from here, you can see your sales tax preferences that we talked about at the beginning of the demo. You can also show your reports that we just looked at, the sales tax liability and the sales tax revenue summary. You're also going to see this big button in here that says Pay Sales Tax. It's important to keep your sales tax in sync, and it's important that you use this Pay Sales Tax button to record your sales tax payment. So let's walk through that together. And I know what you're thinking here, that you don't pay your sales tax with a check from QuickBooks. You pay it online. And it's quite common that I'm going to see in clients' books either a check transaction or an enter bill pay bills that's posted directly to the sales tax liability account, and that is not the proper method to record a sales tax payment. I recommend that you do your filings on your state's website based on the reports in QuickBooks, and then come back into QuickBooks to record those payments through the sales tax module. This is going to help to keep everything happy. Sales tax is all item-based, and just like all other item-based transactions in sales tax, like payroll, inventory, everything we do on invoices, we need to follow the proper workflow to keep the system happy and our reports tying out. After reviewing your reports, go to your pay sales tax. And I know this window is small. You should see your sales tax items listed here. You're also going to want to confirm at the top of the screen your pay from account, the bank account where you issue payments, the payment date or check date, and the reporting period. Show sales tax due through. Since it's the beginning of June, I'm going to be filing my sales tax for the month of May. Let's make a payment to the state of Texas by selecting all of my Texas sales tax items. This is going to total $88.08. Now again, I know what you're thinking, that the amount that QuickBooks shows is never the same as what you pay. And the solution to this is to make an adjustment in QuickBooks to tie out the payment that was calculated and submitted on your state's sales tax website. I know in Texas, we use rounding and we also get an early filing discount. So I use this adjustment screen, this adjustment button, to correctly tie out my payments in QuickBooks to the actual payment that was filed. I use, for my adjustment account, an other income account on my P&L called sales tax discount to record the adjustment. And I have the ability here to increase or reduce sales tax. I'm going to go ahead and do 8 cents here. And I'm going to click OK. When I do that, I get this little message: because you made a sales tax adjustment, the amount paid to each vendor has now been reset. I click OK. I'm going to again come back and select those items as well as my 8-cent adjustment. Now this amount here is going to be $88. That's what I'm going to list as my payment, which should tie out to my sales tax filings. And again, I'm not going to be printing a check from QuickBooks. I paid this online. So my solution here is to uncheck the to be printed box. And I can type in here, maybe I paid with an ACH, or I say online, and I can record that payment. Okay. I can come back into the screen to pay additional taxes if I need to. But here is that $88 tax payment check online paid to taxes. And that is the correct way to record that sales tax payment that is going to reflect on our reports correctly. You can see it also reduced my sales tax payable balance because my sales tax has been decreased, because paying that balance is going to decrease my liability account by those items, and obviously my bank account goes down too. Using this method to pay sales tax is going to be the best tool that you have to keep your sales tax in check and correctly tying out between your balance sheet, your sales tax liability reports. I hope you found this tricky subject to be a little bit more manageable now. Sales tax is a complex aspect of running a business, and using these tools in QuickBooks can help us to better manage the flow of data with sales tax that we have to use every single day. So thank you for joining me today, and we hope to see you back on next week's webinar. Thank you.